all started on the Acropolis in the city that has witnessed countless histories. A legacy divided, a story unfinished, a journey of return, a quest for closure. The story is not yet complete. Be a witness to history. For the first time, an unprecedented discussion, from Heidelberg to Paris. Voices from around the globe, united at one table. Join us in Paris. On March 9th, the future of the Parthenon marbles awaits. Be part of its next chapter. The European Hellenic Foundation. Unity, progress, and culture.
I'd like to thank my co-organizers, the European Hellenic Foundation, and in particular, I would like to thank Dimitris Stavropoulos, Sega Group, and Parasio Group. And I would also like to thank the Acropolis Museum for allowing us to use the image we used on the poster. And this was a photo from the Acropolis Museum. And last and certainly not least, I would like to thank the speakers who are with us today. And I think that's everything. Thank you.
Votre Excellence, je l'ambassadeur du musée de l'Artiste, Votre Excellence auprès de l'UNESCO, M. Zacco, Mesdames et Messieurs, professeurs, M. Joannes. Je voudrais remercier l'Université de Paris Pantheon-Assas, également le Centre national de recherche scientifique et le Centre d'études de recherche sur les sciences administratives et politiques pour le reste de leur contribution à la co-organisation de cette journée table ronde dédiée à la question de la restitution des marbres du Parthenon dans cette prestigieuse université où nous nous trouvons actuellement. Je voudrais également présenter mon conseil d'administration. Je voudrais présenter le vice-président, M. Domas Alexios, notre vice-président, M. Papolis, notre secrétaire général, Mme Vivica Zidoglu, également notre porte-parole et responsable de l'éducation avec Mme Seta Theodori, président de la communauté hellénique de Paris, mais aussi membre à la Fondation européenne hellénique dans le comité d'éducation avec M. Kipasakanas. Et nous attendons également à notre moment notre trésorier, M. Thomas Nicolas. Donc je voudrais vous remercier. Mais je ne vais pas continuer en français. I will speak in English so it will be easier for everyone. More than 200 years have passed since the Parthenon marbles and other important Greek antiquities were stolen by the Scottish lord Elgin and his men. The topic of their return to Greece and their reunification, especially after the action of Medina Mercus in the early years 1980s, is gaining more and more importance. At the beginning of the 19th century, when Greece was under Ottoman occupation, the British Lord Elgin forcibly removed 88 sculptures from the Parthenon temple and one statue, the Caryatide, from the Erechtheion temple on the Acropolis of Athens. This destroyed and mutilated a cultural monument created in the 5th century before Christ. The Greek request for the return of the Parthenon sculptures from the British Museum was first formulated with the establishment of the Greek state in 1830 and continues to be a national and cultural goal. A landmark year for claiming the return of the Parthenon sculptures was 1982 at the UNESCO International Conference in Mexico. The then Minister of Culture, Medina Mercuri, strongly presented the request for the return, which was overwhelmingly voted with 56 votes in favor, 12 against, and 24 abstentions. Today, the request for the return of the Parthenon sculptures is supported by 26 committees of scientists, artists, writers, lawyers, and politicians created in as many countries around the world as we are the European Hellenic Foundation. This is an age-old issue that requires a new approach in order to be resolved. Today, Greece and Britain are close, allies, and friends. We believe that this relationship can produce an achievable and realistic solution that will benefit both countries. We know from government sources that Prime Minister Kyriakos himself is making personal efforts to solve the problem and really needs the Parthenon sculpture. And we wish from all our hearts that these all efforts will bring the expected result. The reunification of the Parthenon sculptures from all over the world will bring back coherence, homogeneity, and history of the monument to which they belong, and will allow visitors to appreciate them better as a whole. By presenting all the Parthenon marbles in their original historical and cultural context, their fuller understanding and interpretation will be allowed. If returned to their original home, the marble will be well lit on the upper floor of the new Acropolis Museum, exposed under the natural sunlight that characterizes the Athenian climate, the way that the ancient Greeks meant to see them. At the moment, the marbles in the British Museum are placed in a rather crowded room without any windows or source of natural light. I hope from all my heart that through this dedicated day in this prestigious university, Pantheon-Assas, Pantheon, and the talks, the conclusions, the experts, we will hear and will reach positive results in a legitimate direction. Thank you.
Catherine. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Je voudrais remercier l'Université Pantheon-Assas pour l'hospitalité. Je voudrais remercier les organisateurs de leur accueil et c'est une journée très spéciale aujourd'hui parce que nous présentons nos vues, nos idées et aussi des nouvelles que nous avons concernant cette idée universelle qui est une requête de la part de l'État grec, pérenne, pour la restitution des structures de nous permettre de parler en anglais parce que c'est la langue qui a été déterminée comme la langue de travail aujourd'hui pour que tout le monde puisse suivre. Ladies and gentlemen, the reunification of the Parthenon sculptures has been a steady pursuit since the creation of the modern Greek state. Early on, General Iωάννης emblematically reminded us of the irrevocable relationship between the Greeks and their cultural heritage. Makrigiannis relates, two exquisite statues were discovered, a woman and a priest. In fact, the veins were visible. They were so perfect. I told the soldiers who had found them, do not let them come out of our homeland, even if you are offered 1,000 thalers. That's what we have fought for. The Athapalisa. Since then, the request for the repatriation of the Parthenon sculptures has acquired international coverage in the 80s by Melina Mercury's campaign, and today, with the government and personally the Prime Minister, Kyriakos, that have given particular emphasis and undertaken actions on multiple levels on the matter. Our claim is supported by scientific, legal, historical, and moral arguments. On the scientific level, unlike other works of art, a monument or a cultural heritage that exists autonomously, standing independently of its immediate surroundings, the Parthenon sculptures are integral parts of an architectural creation, with which they form an indivisible physical, aesthetic, and conceptual whole. The temple is in direct dialectical relationship with the buildings that surround it, and with which they compose a unit, defined and highlighted by the rock and the natural landscape of the Acropolis. This unit has an ideological background that transmits specific messages. It symbolizes the notions it has emanated from: democracy, human measure, the individual at the center of society, and culture, artistic beauty, and harmony. Elgin, we're now turning to the legal historical background. Elgin had the Parthenon sculptures sawn and severed in order to be taken to England aboard the precarious sailing ships of the time that could not really withstand their great weight. Taking this into account, we do not accept ownership by the British Museum. Once transported to that museum, the Parthenon sculptures were further abused, since they were subjected to a treatment that was not particularly protective of them. Moreover, conditions of display and storage at the Titty Gallery, where they're being kept right now, are constantly deteriorating. Finally, one cannot help but be alarmed by the recorded incident of theft of exhibits or items held in the museum, allegedly with the involvement of persons entrusted exactly with the custody of these collections. This remains to be clarified by investigations. On the moral dimension, reunification aims at restoring the integrity of the mutilated temple of Parthenon. Our request has emerged as a universal and timely demand of civil society on an international level. We have been working in a systematic way to attain the national goal of the return of the Parthenon sculptures to Athens. To this end, we use dialogue and cultural diplomacy, informing the international scientific community about the right of the request with honesty and clarity. One of the results of this strategy is a UNESCO resolution that my colleague, the permanent delegate of Greece to UNESCO, Mr. Koumoutsakos, will analyze. In parallel with that, in the last 4 years, fragments of the Parthenon have been returned. Concerted efforts have contributed to substantial progress on this issue. They build alliances at an international level, and by changing perceptions of decades, they create a favorable climate at a global level for the reunification. The targeted moves of recent years, combined with the repatriation of fragments from the sculptural decoration of the Parthenon, including the vacant fragment, the fragments from the Vatican, and with the growing understanding and recognition on an international level of the legitimacy of the Greek request, as well as revelations of security gaps in the British Museum, have given a new impetus to the matter. As heirs of this unique monument for world renown, we steadfastly strive in every legal and appropriate way for the final, permanent, and irreversible return of the sculptures for the sake of restoration of the integrity of the Parthenon. Ladies and gentlemen, Lord Byron, the centenary of whose passing in Thessaloniki will commemorate next month, deeply shaken, wrote the poem The Thirst of Minerva in 1811, shortly after he had witnessed the destruction resulting from the violent severing of the sculptures. He imagines the goddess Athena arriving at the temple, which was built in her honor, and denouncing Elgin for his act of desecration. Lamenting the destruction, she addresses the poet. survey this violated fame, recount the relics torn that yet remain. These Hector's legs, this Pericles adorn. Further in the poem, Byron celebrates the beauty of the surrounding region, reflecting the belief that the genius of ancient Greece can best be understood in the landscape where it emerged. 1 year later, Byron, returning to the tissue, writes in Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. Cold is the heart, fair Greece, that looks on thee, nor feels as lovers over the dust they love. Dull is the eye that will not weep to see thy walls defaced, thy mouldering shrines removed. Ladies and gentlemen, we know where the Parthenon sculptures should be, where they belong. We are working to achieve their return to their birthplace. It is time for these stolen and mutilated masterpieces to be reintegrated to the rest of the Parthenon frieze and shine once again under the Attic light. Thank you.
Όλες και όλους, bonjour à tous, à toutes, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, congratulations to the European Hellenic Foundation for their initiative to organize today's debate, today's roundtable, which focuses on an issue that for over 2 centuries has been in the hearts and minds of all Greeks and very high in the priorities to our basic way for the prevention of illegal trade of cultural goods, which is the UNESCO Convention of 1970 on the means preventing the illicit import, export, and transfer ownership of cultural property. The fight against illicit trafficking and the restitution of cultural goods to their countries of origin are both connected with re-establishment of the unity and integrity of the monuments, reincorporation to the environment where they have been created. Only in this way the cultural discontinuity provoked by their violent removal could be treated rationally. And I will refer as well to the most recent UNESCO's decision on the matter, adopted in September 2021. It is very important, historical, I would say, decision. The UNESCO's World Heritage Committee expressly refers to the legitimate and rightful demand of Greece, recognizes that the case has an intergovernmental character and therefore the obligation to return the Parthenon sculptures lies squarely on the United Kingdom government. Expresses its deep concern that the issue still remains pending. Expresses further its disappointment that its respective recommendations have not been observed by the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, which is called to reconsider its stand and proceed to a bona fide dialogue with Greece on the matter. Ladies and gentlemen, not only developments in the realm of international law are positive and encouraging for Greece's efforts. International practice as well has been steadily changing in recent years in a positive way. Public opinion in the UK as well is changing in a spectacular pace, being more than ever before favorable to the return of the Parthenon sculptures to where they have from time immemorial belonged. All that has been mentioned strengthened even more Greece's resolve to continue these undiminished efforts bilaterally and or multilaterally till the moment when the mission will be accomplished and the stolen masterpieces will be again bathed in the Attic light. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday we celebrated the International Women's Day. Allow me to close these remarks with the words of an emblematic woman, an astounding personality, Milena Mercouri. You must understand what the Parthenon models mean to us. They are our pride. They are our noblest symbol of excellence. They are our thankful tribute to the moments. Thank you.
Professor Sarah Wellington deeply regrets that she has had to pull out at the last minute. She has written sending her warmest congratulations to the organizers. She hopes the event will be a enormous success and sends her best wishes for everyone involved today in what is sure to be a stimulating and productive discussion. Very sadly, we don't have Professor Andrew Wells with us today. He was with us yesterday evening, but he has had a medical emergency this morning, and also he regrets not being here, and we regret him to be back.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, Legates, and permanent delegates to Cyprus. I am very delighted to see such a large audience, and I see that this is a topic that is so dear to the Greek heart. I cannot possibly ask to more and substance to what we heard about how important this topic is for the Greeks, the Greek community, the Hellenic Republic. What I would like to is looking from an academic perspective. I think in the difficult times that we are, it's all the more important that we come together and have these discussions. And in particular, strength lies in an interdisciplinary approach. And that's why all the more I'm extremely pleased to have such a thing here, coming as we academics sometimes tend to do not only from one area, but actually coming together from several areas of academia, practice, and coming together to discuss solutions to get very marvelous things.
Of the main statements of the time, the locals are indifferent. And Elvin said, if the commission survives, the commission that he said that he had to remove the novel, it will probably be in Athens, it will probably be with my man Lucieri. And the community did not send for Lucieri to see whether he had permission. The committee itself did not reach a conclusion as to whether the models had been obtained locally, whether Elvin had permission. He just repeated the statements that Elvin and his men made. So the report says we have there is a transcript that is published of the questioning between the committee and the different people who turned up. And there is a short report. The report simply says Elvin said so, Karen said so, Lucieri said so, but there are no concrete conclusions that are drawn by the committee itself. And I'm going to mention a very final argument, very final legal argument, and that is that
we have the 200th anniversary of Lefas. And this year is also celebrated as a year. And I can imagine a better expression of the unification of the fragments that are not only in the British Museum, but they are also in Munich, they are in Europe, they are in Copenhagen. This is not an accident of great hours to work with nature, but relativism as an expression of genuine appreciation of the Now, about the various models for the reunification of the Parthenon markets. I insist on using the word reunification and not the word repatriation for reunification. Words matter. Words not only matter for the reunification, words also matter to change the perspective from which we observe the phenomenon. When one uses the word reunification, one highlights the fact of the mutilation of the Parthenon, the fragmentation of the work of art, and the spreading of its fragments all over Europe. This is a different perspective from the perspective of the national claim of the repatriation. It's the same thing, but the perspective is different. And what is now important is how Greece can win the support of why it is important to highlight that we are dealing with a unique situation of a building that was intentionally destroyed so that fragments can be in the possession of a later British museum. I think this is important. Now, about the Stern collection. The Stern collection is a collection of 161 artifacts from the site of Pisa. And we do not know when they were found. We do not know where they were found. They are in the possession of a private collector. And already this shows that we have absolutely nothing to do with the Stern collection is a continuous assemblage of objects that never belonged together. They were also never meant to be displayed because they were placed in place. They were meant to be moved. They have absolutely nothing to do with the architectural decoration of the building. The other problem for which the Stern collection and the agreement were developing have not served is because of the various details of this agreement. The Stern collection will be ultimately repatriated in the year 2073. And until then, only pieces are going to be displayed in Greek museums starting from 15 years, 10 years. And in exchange for artifacts from Greece, displayed in the Metropolitan Museum, as it is stated in the agreement. These objects should be of similar significance and beauty, and or similar significance and value. And this is where, as an ancient historian and archaeologist, I start asking myself, how do you determine the value of an object? Do you go to an antiquarian store in Basel and ask them how much is the current price of a square centimeter of Cycladic figurine? How do you determine equivalent beauty? And as I said, this is a gradual return of the object, 15 in a term of every 3 years, in exchange for objects from all Greek museums. If we apply this model for the Elgin marbles, I would imagine that the British Museum sends 3 horsemen in exchange for the charioteer in Delphi of equal value and significance for 3 years, and then 3 years later they send a couple of persons from the procession of that is represented on the trees, and Greece sent, the Mask of Agamemnon, and so on. Only someone who has absolutely no idea about either the Parthenon marbles or Cycladic figurines can say that the agreement for the Stern collection can serve in any way as a model for the reunification of the Parthenon marbles.
Yeah, we have the substantial trend. We have a website to be united. You do movies, stories, use comedy, poems, which we work well because it's not right. Very much of the pillar that is relation before them, sectors. And we try to create the other. What we do, we measure the system and we try to measure how the and which is more movement, but in a positive way towards the practice. The latest one, 50% people, for various reasons, geographies, education level, well, that's what we do. In all this area. Then we provide the people. So we see the notice. So the next step we thought we get and this time we went to Washington but he was rather like the coach and he ignored the letter from method to the Iraqis and we tried to index and it should not oversee the amount of get bigger piece of money. So we did not succeed with breaks it, and then we try to approach the points used to use the concept of the new global league concept sports. So in this lobbying effort, I think we did the development of board of advisors. We have for laws. We have one judges, and we have previous certain branch. We have Michael Bloch, who is see the movie. We have Dr. Meyer, who is the Michael Bloch. We have so we have a very strong team of very strong emphasis at this point for now we have to see the little level was sitting together. So within get quite and thank you to the addition of the party and the latest model we have the latest model we have is the following. We would like to create a foundation between the two companies. That will be the basis of our partial partnership. So we have seven principles. We say a lot of people know the history is well analyzed, not alone. All of this forward. So our idea is not to look at the past, not to look at the so the idea is to create a foundation between the two companies that essentially would gather in a very broad scheme, including the regulation of scholarships. But the big element of this will be the moving forward of the partner structure of partnership. In addition, of course, the biggest law that to be in Galley people who are familiar with the museum. And you probably are aware that the all kinds of things. And they need the power that they say about to restore it. And I'm going to start with the Spring to move the whole Western Egyptian. And we looked into this that if the partners come from Mumbai, this is one of the books. They cannot move up, there is a building, they cannot move north, south, left, right. And the concept they have how this would be negative. So we have in foundation is that three you will actually overrun. You welcome, the name. Make it Gallery, and of course we need to have architectural support. It's going to be difficult to make this room suitable for so the idea is to convert this to a modern possible museum because this museum So the idea is to use the artifact.
They also say, again, the statement of the museum, that the division is not given in case, and then they bring some examples bring medieval and Renaissance authors. To more seriousness compare a building two or three paintings together. We're not talking about comparing the division to the Basilica of San Marco, finding the Sistine Chapel, as we said, that is a relevant comparison, but not a comparison with an altar. Now, this division, they say the marbles can be admired. They give you different perspectives. So, again, in London, they're appreciated in the context of history because they sit next to mummies and next to the Rosetta Stone and what else. And in Athens, they can be admired in the context of Athenian history. But I would like to remind you that the marbles are not a curiosity to look at in the cabinet. And a French novelist said that about the marbles that back in the 18th century, if I knew how to pronounce his name, I would have a very long name. I don't know how to pronounce it. He said to divide is to destroy. Said in the 19th century, he was commenting on Napoleon's spoliations in Italy, and he was very much opposed to spoliations, and he said, to divide is to destroy. This continues to be true. Now, the way the marbles are divided between London and Athens, the story, the narrative that is told by the trees and by the methods is interrupted. And not only that, we have statues themselves that split. One of the examples is the Poseidon from the Western Bedouin. The front and middle part of his torso, I have to look at it, it's so complicated that I don't remember. The front and middle part of his torso is in Athens. The back and upper part of his torso, his shoulders and collarbos are in London. Does this division convey a positive advantage and public benefit? Because part of his torso can be admired in Athens, and part of his torso can be admired in London.
Can never be completed if not all the fragments of the Parthenon sculpture are reunified. And as I said, some of the Greece, in 2007, I wrote a letter to the Wittelsbach House, who managed the collection of the pieces that were part of the collection of the Bavarian dynasty. And I received a letter explaining that these pieces are not part of the Bavarian culture, because they have been in Munich for almost 200 years. This is an argument used by the British Museum. We care for them, we have them here, so they are not part of the British Museum. I don't think that these arguments can be taken seriously, precisely for the reasons that I explained. The integrity of the book. You can say, for instance, that I actually admire heads, so that they all the heads. Museum, I admire feet. Feet is well known. So let's put a feet in another museum. This is absolutely nonsense. And also the Prime Minister gave the example of Mona Lisa pieces. Before that, years ago, I had
presented the following scenario. We need to use these scenarios because they show that they lead ad absurdum the arguments of the British Museum. Let us imagine that a musical composition of Tchaikovsky's work, the symphony, is discovered, and 60% is owned by a collector in Japan, 25% is owned by a collector in Germany, these pieces are owned by others, and someone uses the argument, well, I'm not going to give my 60% to play with the rest of the composition, because I prefer to play with the music from the Ant or from Papua New Guinea or music of the Aborigines in Australia. The integrity of the work of art. Now, the British Museum is a universal museum, and universal museums have an educational value. But the argument that Greek art can be admired in connection with the subjects of Easter islands or Egyptian culture and so on can actually be met with agreements of collaboration between Greece and the British Museum, as you explained before, when the rooms in which the Parthenon sculptures are now displayed in the British Museum are empty, and I'm sure that they will be empty one day, then they can be filled with temporary exhibitions from Greek provincial museums, not with the themes of equivalent value and beauty and so on. This is the way we can promote Greek culture. There are a lot of Greek museums in Limnos, in Mytilene, in Patras, in Iωάννη, and so on, that do not have the numbers of visitors that the Property Museum, the National Museum in Athens attract, but they have extremely important works of art. And in temporary exhibitions, this is why also one needs a foundation, because temporary exhibitions cost money. One will have the possibility to show to the visitors of the British Museum every couple of years something new, something that shows the diversity of Greek art and shows in connection with the art of other cultures, and without damaging a work of art. There is no need to compare cultures and artistic developments by mutilating on purpose a work of art and keeping it mutilated forever. This is why the arguments of the British Museum cannot really be taken seriously.
The context of does the project have a bigger plan for the future to expand also to other places where practice marvels are in other countries?
I have to say, I do not have experience. I do know projects that I do not engage our policies in detail. And there was specialist policies, and that's very careful. And I think right now, it's a golden opportunity for us to do something, because the previous director of the leadership left, the director, and very, very young, so it's very difficult to raise from in essence, people give money to build something, they don't give money, give money to replace the skyline or another form of pay. So they have a situation they have to find money. They do know that it's a matter of time, they have to do something. And people are realizing now that the sooner the better. And as they can we receive support. We have a couple of experiences for the days. They say, I want to move on to 2005, a small island. And they think that way, but most of the people from all sides of political spectrum and actually they do a big part. So I think it's a golden opportunity to display them and to create a model of how an agreement between two nations, like France can work. The Parthenon project is basically the British like to start as a good for both parties and good for everyone. We try to do something. So what I'm not trying to say is we try to find a win
win-win. So it's not a zero-sum game. This is a spending mine, and if you have to lose one, gain one. We try to create 1 + 1 makes 2.5. That's one thing. The second thing is you have to realize this airport is very big for us that we became specialists in this. And really, we do not have, it's not only to give money. You have to put personal attention, your sweat and tears in every word. You have to be there. If we run, my wife and I run, other people follow. We start working, other people follow. It takes a lot of toll on us. We do this, we have to run a business, we have to make money, subsidize this, to pay for that. And I think it's a good opportunity now to create a new model of museum, which you see in many places, to see it again. So I would say, I'm sorry that for the expertise, for the time, for the knowledge, for the money, we have to be laser focused on this.
For now. Thank you very much, John. I would like to briefly address some of the arguments that are raised by the opponents of the idea of reunification. One of them that one hears quite a lot is that opening the floodgates Pandora's box argument, namely that if the British Museum comes in, the result will be that the type of universal museums that you mentioned will have to get back all of their artifacts, not only one identified universal museums, not only the British Museum, but all over the world, which you mentioned do have some indication of value. What's your answer to this opening the floodgate from the response arguments to secure the models?
Yes, this is one of the greatest worries of the British Museum, of the British Museum, of all educational universal museums that have collections that were acquired in a period before international law determined what you are allowed to collect and under those conditions. I think that it is important to highlight the exceptional character of the Parthenon marbles. The Parthenon marbles are not the same as the head of Nefertiti, for instance. The head of Nefertiti was not known to anyone until it was discovered by the archaeologists. And the weight of the is not 100% illegal, but it was one head that was unknown to the international audience. The Parthenon sculptures were always visible. They were part of the most cultural heritage long before they were taken. We have drawings, for instance, that were made even before the destruction by Morosini. They were known, they were appreciated, they were part of the. So one cannot regard in exactly the same way the sculptures which was then the result of an excavation that was found. It wasn't visible, it wasn't there, it wasn't part of the cultural heritage, the core cultural heritage. They are more comparable to the Titty sculpture. The Titty sculpture is a case of looted material that belonged again to a particular building. It was looted by the British Army in the 1870s. And one can see also the electricity of the British Museum in this respect, because the British Museum in the 60s started selling some were sold to others. This shows that the idea that we will never repay does not have the possibility to give, donate, give us a loan, and so on. Its property is not valid. This is why I think that it is important to also protect the British Museum from the flood or Pandora's box. And the model of the donation is precisely such a protection, because the donation is a transfer of property that does not raise the question of how an object was acquired. It is an ultimate transfer of property, unlike the case of the law. In the case of the law, you immediately connect to the law the question of property and possession. This is exactly what happened in the case of the third collection. The third collection, according to the opinion, is owned by the Greek state, but it is in the possession of Stern and the institute that he founded. It is a loan that was given by a priest to him ex post, which is absurdity in my view. Anyway, so I think that it's important that one highlights the case of the Parthenon as a unique monument of world culture. This is also why I think that highlighting the repatriation may be a problem, and highlight the reunification of the world of art. There are cases that may be similar, and in these cases, some of these international world museums need to do something. This is already happening with the Venice Capital. This is why I mentioned the Venice Capital. The Metropolitan Museum, the museums, one museum, Venice Capital, Nigeria. There is a discussion about the United States. It is a comparable case, but it is a case that is relatively limited and does not threaten, in my view, the existence of these universal museums. I would even go one step further. I would go a step further and argue that at some point also such world museums, educational museums, should be put under the protection of the UNESCO as part of the world culture. The Louvre has a value, the British Museum has a value, the Museum has a value. They also need to be protected. Just imagine, for instance, a terrorist attack against the Louvre or the Metropolitan Museum, and this is why one should go in such a careful way and with careful possible steps in order, on the one hand, to achieve the reunification of the world of art, and at the same time, not undermine the existence of museums that offer education and are valuable for our society.
Thank you very much. It's interesting that you mentioned the legal constructs, for example, compared to economic transactional lease back that they're giving, well, the loan that Greece managed as a loan that is for certain period of time. We see that in the end, they also do the same things. Legal constructs and the way how bridges are quite important. Hopefully, we've come a long way from the first efforts. In the 70s, can you maybe tell us where is the legal world? Maybe putting more for a second aside, the international law of reunification, repatriation, where is it? What's developed in the last year? What we can learn from this?
Thank you. So essentially, we have two major, three major conventions. One which does not have very well mentioned, but there's two. So we have the 1970 UNESCO Convention, which is the creation of cultural property that was removed, but the convention is limited in scope because for a number of reasons, but also because it only permits repatriation, not only permits, but it obliges the states to repatriate property that was removed since the two states signed and ratified the convention. So if the state was not a member of the convention in 1970, in 1985, it's enforced deviation from 1985. We also have the 1954 Hague Convention, and its first protocol, which concerns the repatriation of cultural property taken in times of war. In fact, both of these conventions cover times of period of occupation. But what is significant is that the 1954 Hague Convention
is generally considered during our customer international. There are people even in the state of signing so in Mexico, the ICC meeting was quite focusing on the creations of objects that do not fall within the scope of the United States. And the thing is that states consider the everyday objects, but then also nice. It's very significant. They create objects that do not fall under certain. And we have an example of things. National in environments where we had too long and I love that books designed to evaluate our information environmental in the United States, where it's all across the line, and also being very inspired and interesting that when people when it's really so the question they evaluate and often models and we have as I'm mentioned we have and we also story mentioning we have mosaics that have been done. The highest administrative report in Italy has considered Italy has returned a nation from a statue from Libya, and Italy has taken from Libya, and the highest administrative Italian report said, in fact, it is customary in international objects, that such objects have to go back. And I think that we see that in particular the British Museum is getting increasingly isolated because we see relocations taking place, as Angela mentioned, in Britain too. So it is, there are museums, the V&A, the Victorian Art Museum, wanted to, that was my understanding, wanted to repatriate an object that belonged to a sarcophagus in Istanbul. Like the British Museum, they are prevented by law from doing so. They eventually extended the loan of states. But the director of the V&A, as I understood, was at the forefront of efforts to change the law in England to allow museums to repatriate objects. And this didn't go ahead eventually. The relevant provisions have been not enforced. They're further subject to further consideration. We don't know when the provision. But we see in general that there is a movement, there is a change in the environment. I think that we see the customer international evolving. And I would like to remind us that there is no restriction in international law. So unlike domestic legal systems, where if you want to claim an object, you have to wait within a given period of time. In international law, there is no such time limit. There are some protections, such as the state asks for an object for many years, then one would say, well, it has created direction, and it's not going fast. So this will eventually prevent the state from claiming it. But there is no prescription as such in international law. So I would just like to close by saying that we see that things are changing, and we see every day more repatriation. And again, there are repatriations, as Angela said, of specific objects. It's not about stress. It's not about repatriating repatriation, whatever word you want to use, everything, and maybe not. I think it's also important to acknowledge that museums do that. So I would just like to give you a quick example. The National History Museum in Vienna, the anthropology department, has been repatriated for that months. And I remember this one case that I was told about, where they were in touch with the indigenous community that had been claiming this scientific remains, or whatever it was. And they said, we're going to look into the history. And they looked, that's how I remember it, that was my understanding. They looked into their own archives. They themselves looked at the museum, and they found the diary of the person who had taken these remains from the original location. And in his diary, he said, I asked if I could have permission to go to the cemetery and dig them up. And I was told no. And he went there at night and supposed to hide what he did them. So the people in Vienna, they said, well, for us, this is good enough reason to evacuate them. They do not have the right to stay.
I'd like to take a moment to look a little bit into the future. And Angela, for example, we've heard that you are clearly not a huge fan of law, but can you address this already a little bit? Can you tell us a bit more about what is actually the current best practice in museums, whether it's university museums, smaller museums, and where do you see actually the development of this best practice going, let's say, looking to the future in the next 5 years?
I'm certainly not the best person in this room to answer this question. So or have experience in this respect. But I think that we need to focus, first of all, in educating the public opinion about the importance of these matters. This is why this event is so important. And the public opinion is the strongest ally in the efforts, not only concerning the public, but concerning any aspect of cultural heritage. Apart from this, from my experience, there is not one single model that needs to be followed. We need to avoid generalizations, and we need to look at particular contexts. This is why I stressed before that the Department of Marbles is one case. There may be other cases. For instance, a good practice may also be the permanent law. This is something that the British Museum has done. For instance, they returned to an Indian tribe in Canada objects that were of cultural significance. This was done in the form of a law. There are other cases in which this can be done in the form of one-sided act of transfer of nation, but I find another term perhaps in order to solve the problem. My point is look at the specific conditions and the specific value or significance of the object, and instead of using generalizations and creating cases of legal precedents, because they are actually counterproductive. And this is something that, in my view, also the UNESCO is doing in a very organized manner, not just making general rules and try to apply them, but trying to see the specific conditions, the specific value, and the specific circumstances in order to find the best solution
John, also looking into the future, where do you see in the next 5 years? And maybe also this kind of legal inside the country. Where do you see some of the obstacles that you face, but also you expect to face in the next 5 years until the project succeeds?
I think of also opportunities. However, today, really the government here to encourage an agreement with everybody knows about it, but they have to test of the boards. And certainly for us to get help, but not elected, and we don't give official position. So in our case, certainly globally, it's very important to the case, but we focus pretty much on the right. But so we have a distinct situation like this has a plethora of arguments, and they want to know more than argue, and Britain wants to find a solution to the problem. You know, the British have a storm that would say access, so they have to find a solution. So we have a good opportunity to start. The next step is to be that the people come together and create in principle this foundation with the way of vision is going to be like the job. Two governments want to make a to develop a market, they come together and they make a participatory constitution of the republic. They are putting also directly three Greeks, three Brits, three independence, three structure. Then I think the Parthenon project can be the venue and help finance the structure because they need a lot of money. They are not a believer of using tax for money. I do feel that there is enough good people over there that they will, if they have a good thing in front of them, and these people is just a good private individuals that have, you know, the ability to do that. And there will be foundations with deployment to some of them. And so the next step is for the board, the big for the museum and all this. The other thing I like to apply with this, right? You know, we look at actually they were very creative. They believes they have all these rights, and they believe they have all these rights, which means nobody has rights. So they put in ambiguity. They're like you can wait and not accept. So the belief they're always still about one market for one third from here, from part one, half of this. Everybody knows whatever goes with it. Everybody knows this. They just talk. They talk about production, they talk about this. So this is not. So the situation we have now in the world, we have the law, which separate the values separate from the they don't have the exact 63 that says that they cannot, this cannot be back anything except the. So we tried some years back, the people, the private members bill, with the Margaret Trier, who's the sport national party, we worked with the partner and we raised one bill. And we're ready to go. That's all we have. We will not have the work because it's not a user. So we do not think that with the current government or the voters are going to have a chance to do something. We do have indications from Labour that if the Presidency has a deal, they will not be an obstacle, but they will not change the law. So that's why we're today. I think change the law is going to be a bit more solution. It's going to be doing something that would be something. Or something that nobody thinks that's exactly what it is.
Thank you very much. Also because slide already that under international law, the marbles belong to each other. Extremely strong case to be made. But then there is still national legislation in England that trusts them to the British Museum. So also in view of the fact that with respect to British laws came to St. Base, do you think will have kept that casual to the British Museum repatriated marbles? Should it be the government of British leave together their British laws?
Thank you. I will be very brief in light of the time, and it will sound absolutely true. Of course, ideally the government would repatriate the marbles. This is the new government answer. I'd say it's a classic international dispute, not a necessarily dispute, but that's an international law. We understand it's disagreement, an international disagreement. For international law, rather national law cannot agree with national law be used as an excuse so as not to comply with an international obligation. Mexico said in 2021 that the United Kingdom in the sea, it said so it has the obligation, the obligation to return part of the marbles lies on the United Kingdom. What it meant was not the British Museum. The British Museum is bound by the control, so ideally, maybe look for maybe a way for the British Museum to permanently return the marbles, but ideally the government would change the law, do so by directly transferring, passing a law that transfers the creation of the marbles to Greece, or it could do, these two provisions that I do, one provision actually that I mentioned earlier that has been delayed from the Charities Act 2022, it can enter into force. This will allow the British Museum to ask permission to repatriate marbles. I would just like to say that the British Museum itself is a public body. It's a non-governmental public body, but it belongs to the state. It's called an arm's length body. The idea is that it is distanced from the state, so it takes its own decisions. But we know very well that arm's length bodies have their arms twisted by government. Because they're subject to what the government imposes on them. We may have all the same time. So this
You were absolutely perfect in that. And indeed, you could have had this conversation about the shower. A lot of interesting questions that I'd like to ask, but also we would like to give the opportunity to the public to ask questions. Since we have such a distinguished panel here, I think it would be a shame otherwise if it is. So we'll be inviting questions from anyone who offers us comments. You have all of your microphones in front of you, so when you speak, please press.
First of all, I would like to thank for the participants, professors, Lefas, and all of the legal committees present on this one day. I have a question I listened to you, Professor Titty. It seems that we have a legal argument to put forward. And I'm asking if it's not time to take this matter to the international court. Why? Perhaps before, first of all, it can set a precedent. Also, this procedure can help to put Britain authorities on to sit quickly perhaps on the table of negotiations and to accelerate the process to find the solution to resolve the problem once and for all. So my question is, why this option was never considered?
Thank you. The option was proposed, has been put to the government, and the Greek government has decided not to use the option.
time is not right for that option. Maybe, I don't know what will then be, but a judicial case always has a risk. And I think with the models are too important risks to risk giving the decision to third party. But I think that we should be invoking risks, should be invoking the legal argument in its negotiations, and I think, for instance, that the Prime Minister that is already made a statement that was property of the models is not questioned. This is important from the legal point of view, because if the government says that if the government simply the property belongs to the British Museum, then under international law it will probably make it impossible for it to claim the models. So I think maybe the legal argument is indirectly fitting into the negotiations, and I think it could be done.
A question for panel. We have now looked at the fragments of the Parthenon. Will the authorities start a campaign here in France, bring them back? Must we start directly because discussions with the French government?
First of all, already in late August 2019, the Prime Minister said that this was in preparation for the celebration of the 20 years from the War of Independence, and he would request from President the exhibition of the two fragments from the Louvre in Athens. I think it was the 29th of August of 2019 when he said that. There was no outcry in Greece about that. There was an outcry. 1 week later, he said the marbles from the British Museum as a loan. The opposition said, well, we cannot do that. So nobody reacted when he said he would request the Louvre fragments as a loan. And this has something to do with the particular relations between Greece and France, and so on. It is also a bigger question because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that there are laws that do not allow the Louvre to, so similar as in the British Museum, to be deprived of any part of its collection. For me, it is a unique opportunity. Now celebrating the year of independence to encourage these museums that still have fragments of the Parthenon sculptures in a united action to return them to Greece. I use now the word return, because if they do it jointly, this is also something that protects them from imprisonment. It is something that highlights the unique situation that we're dealing with. And I think that this should also be part of the campaign. We have concentrated far too long on the British Museum. We have been calling the British stage, you have stolen, your thieves, and so on. This is not the way one can win the public opinion and achieve a result. And I think that it should be part of a campaign for the reunification of all the Parthenon sculptures, and this concerns, as I said, Munich, it concerns the British Museum, it concerns the Louvre, it concerns Würzburg, it also has a fragment, and Oppenheim, and Vienna, yes, let's forget the Austrian. Citizens from these countries fought and gave their lives in the War of Independence in the 19th century, so respecting and honoring them would be a nice gesture in 2024, 200 years later, in the year of independence, to do something like that. So I think that this should be a new phase in the Greek campaign for the restoration of the
Thank you. My name is Iωάννης. I think as well, in practical terms, what is going forward? What is the path that leads to the market's unification? We know as things stand that the British Museum cannot by law permanently become the part of the market. So should the law change? Professor Hagiotis spoke about the donation earlier. Now the UK government, as it stands, is not willing to agree to such a move. And Mr. Leffa spoke about the vision for a foundation to be created. So I'd like to hear from the speakers how in practical terms this could happen.
I think we're going to look at it because in 200 years, it is the first time that it's been decided. And Mr. Dorothy opened the door for dialogue, and that's a very positive development. And I think, you know, for us, there's many ways to set everybody for the same objective. You know, after this time, our belief is there is enough of the opportunity to get the discussion. I think there is a way to actively able to finance this dynamic change. Put new studies there on this. I think it's going to be changing the law of the National Museum side. I think we have to find a little bit more creative way to or something like this that might not be the best way for purists, but some kind of practice. Notice that the marbles, the sculpture will never go back. So we find something together, and then we, when all over the countries, that's it. That's what we
Enough, so I recognition that the UK government should pass along and transfer the creation of the models to Greece. I will go beyond that and think about the practical necessities change from the course necessary in the UK. And I would like to draw the attention to the fact that the Times, which is a conservative newspaper that traditionally has supported the redemption of the models, has now changed its position, and I think this is likely to push further a public opinion in the UK. I think changing public opinion is essential. Ultimately, politicians are going to take into account what the constituents think. I also think that pressure will be increasing on all the other evacuation place. Pressure will be increasing on the British Museum and the UK government. And I would just like to mention the example, different example of one evacuation. In the British Museum, there was a bust of Sloan, and Sloan was the founder of the British Museum. He gave his collection to the British Museum, and he gave from family wife shore that had wealth from slaves, the slave owning fund. And there was at some moment public outcry that the British Museum had fast the prominent position in the museum, and they said this vast must be removed. And the UK government sent letters to various museums, even though they are arm's-length bodies, and it said, remember, you're funded by taxpayer money. You should not remove contested objects. The word contested was actually used. And the British Museum said, we will not. And they did not. They did not give away the vast loan. But what happened was that after this initial very negative
reaction to pressure that they were being put under. In fact, they quietly took the bus and put it in a cabinet behind glass, and now they have added a label that says Hans-Joachim slave owner. And the reason I use this example is to say that public pressure, while in prison, is very important. And honestly, for me, it would be better for the British Museum if they decided to return the marbles to Greece and do it proudly and say, look at what we are doing. It's a very generous gesture. It's a very beautiful gesture. Than to be obliged to do so in a few years because the pressure would have been out as well.
Thank you. It's not ready. Okay, now, I agree with everything that was said before, but I will also add an additional note. And this has to do with the fact that the British Museum is also concerned with saving face. Let's not forget we're dealing with the British, with what has been left of the British Empire, and with which history the British Museum is connected. So if one puts a lot of political pressure, if one negotiates as the government with the British Museum, you have on the one hand the state, and on the other hand you have the museum. I think that what needs also to be tried in order to highlight the scientific, moral, scholarly value of this repatriation or reunification is also to exploit the knowledge and of experts and to have negotiations between the Acropolis Museum and the British Museum. It will change the climate of the negotiations. It makes a huge difference if a prime minister tries to meet another prime minister in order to discuss this at a higher level, or if you have specialists who know and appreciate art and talk about what is the best way to go forward. This is something that has not been tried or has not been tried extensively, and I think that it is going to bear fruit. But I think I agree with what was said before, that the most important weapon in this respect is the pressure from the public opinion. The British Museum is a brand name. The members of the Board of Trustees of the British Museum are not scholars. If you look at their biographies, they are investors, they are entrepreneurs, also some scholars. They care about the brand name for which they stand. If this brand name is wounded because it is connected with immoral acts or with not respecting cultural values, this is what is going to make them change their opinion, and then pressure is going to come to the British government, not just from the public, not from the Greek government. Pressure is going to come from those who have the curatorship in the Department of Sculpture. So this is why I think it is very important to mobilize also on expertise. I proposed years ago, but this proposal was never taken up, that the Greek Parliament, with increased majority, in order not to present this as a matter of the current government, whatever the current government is, appoints such a committee that assists the efforts of the Greek government for the reunification of
I think it's another question in the audience.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your insights on your university side. This one and other. I've got two questions for Professor Titty. The first one, you mentioned there are specific cultural properties should be repatriated, and as Professor Hanotis mentioned, that it's really hard to put a value on an object. So what parameters should be set for these specific cultural properties? Who should set them and how to finance it? And secondly, under the shelter principle of the property law, how should they compensate the moment when they purchase them, whether it's a public or private sector, or returning the cultural object?
Sorry, I didn't get the second question.
The moment when they purchaser, under the shelter principle or protocol, they don't really get costs, even though it's a stolen object or an illegal object. So if they return the cultural property, how should they be compensated? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. From a legal point of view, and of course, without a video presented as legal, the parameters that you mentioned, they are specific. They are specific to each object. So it's really not possible to talk in general about how to decide if an object is important or is not important, or how important it is to each state. And I'll give an example, maybe it will be easier to understand. As for an example, an argument that has been raised about the Rosetta Stone. And this is, I don't know much about the Rosetta Stone, so I'm just going to repeat an argument that I thought was interesting, but I don't have the. So the Rosetta Stone was, I think, discovered.
Yes.
At the basis of the international conventions. The person who had bought, let's say, an object that was stolen, in good faith, they can claim compensation, but they can't keep the object. The object still has to be returned. And in the case of the Parthenon novels, of course, my issue is that there was no good faith in how they were built, so that does not enter into.
Spirit of the last foundation. Politically and legally, it's a rather complicated issue. But on the other side, I think there are some positive. First of all, the will is there, stronger, the government, and even stronger, I would say, in the hearts and minds of the nation. Second, international law is evolving to a positive direction, favoring the arguments put forward by Greece. Third, the practice of repatriation is gaining ground. In many countries, many museums, so it changes the atmosphere, which they are trying to succeed in our past. Public opinion in the UK is changing rapidly in the positive direction. So having all this in mind,
Χανιώτη, δηλώσατε σήμερα για το brand name στην απάντηση που δώσατε του Βρετανικού Μουσείου. Αυτό το brand name δίνει και την ευκαιρία στο Βρετανικό Μουσείο να κάνει και τις...
Είναι που κάνετε και σχετίζεται με ένα γενικότερο πρόβλημα, το οποίο είναι πώς ο παραδοσιακός πολιτισμός μπορεί να συνδεθεί με τον σύγχρονο πολιτισμό ή με την σύγχρονη αγορά. Επομένως, υπάρχει μια πολύ μεγάλη διαφορά για το αν κανένα συνδέει ένα αρχαίο μνημείο με σύγχρονα έργα τέχνης και εντελώς διαφορετικό αν συνδέει κανένας ένα αρχαίο μνημείο με κάτι το οποίο απευθύνεται στην αγορά, είναι κάτι το οποίο εμένα δεν με βρίσκει σύμφωνο. Θα μπορούσε μάλιστα κανένας να προχωρήσει και παραπέρα και να θεωρήσει ότι αποτελεί και μια πρόκληση προς την Ελλάδα, διότι ως γνωστόν και η έκθεση, αυτή η επίδειξη μόδας ήταν ενός Τούρκου σχεδιαστή. Δεν νομίζω του Βρετανικού Μουσείου να θέλει να δείξει ότι είναι ακόμα ένα λιοντάρι που βρυχάται σε έναν κόσμο ο οποίος έχει αλλάξει.
Ήταν διπλή πρόκληση κατά αυτόν τον τρόπο. Και επίσης σήμερα κάνετε αναφορά ξανά, αναφερθείτε.
Για ποια συμφωνία εννοείτε?
Αν μια συμφωνική, μια μουσική.
Ναι. Ένα από τα επιχειρήματα του Βρετανικού Μουσείου είναι το επιχείρημα. Φαντάζομαι αν είχε βρεθεί μια χαμένη συμφωνία του Τσαϊκόφσκι, βρίσκονται χαμένα έργα μουσικής και έχει αγοράσει το 60% της παρτιτούρας κάποιος συλλέκτης στην Ιαπωνία, το 20% κάποιος στην Αμερική. Αυτό το οποίο υπερέχει σε όλα αυτά τα επιχειρήματα είναι μπορεί να εκτιμηθεί μόνο την ολόκληρη και όχι κομματιασμένο.
Ένα σημείο της Ευρώπης με βαρύτητά του στο Παρίσι, καθώς είναι και η έδρα της UNESCO. Και θα ήθελα λίγο να κάνεις ένα σχόλιο θέμα.
Πιστεύω ότι οι συζητήσεις σαν τη σημερινή γίνονται στέρεη επιχειρηματολογία, με ρεαλισμό αλλά και την αποφασιστικότητα που απαιτεί μια δύσκολη αποστολή, όπως το να επιστρέψουν και να επανενωθούν τα κλεμμένα μάρμαρα του Παρθενώνα, εκεί όπου πραγματικά γεννήθηκαν και ανήκουν. Είναι πολύ σημαντικό αυτές οι συζητήσεις, όπως σας είπα, να γίνονται με αυτό το πνεύμα του ρεαλισμού αλλά και της πληρότητας. Όσον αφορά στην UNESCO, αυτό το οποίο θα ήθελα να πω είναι ότι όλες τις οι αποφάσεις αλλά και οι σχετικές με το θέμα αυτό συμβάσεις της ευνοούν την ελληνική επιχειρηματολογία. Θα είναι πάντα μια χρήσιμη πηγή που θα κάνει ακόμα πιο ισχυρά τα ελληνικά επιχειρήματα. Η συζήτηση, όπως ξέρετε, και η προσπάθεια δεν τελειώνει. Εμείς θα συνεχίσουμε να κάνουμε τη δουλειά που μας αναλογεί στην UNESCO με την ισχύ που μας δίνει η αποφασιστικότητα της ελληνικής κυβέρνησης και του Έλληνα Πρωθυπουργού να διεκδικήσει και να οδηγήσει σε αίσια έκβαση αυτό το δίκαιο αίτημα της χώρας.
Θεωρώ ότι είναι σημαντική η σημερινή εκδήλωση από την άποψη ότι είναι σημαντικό το να ευαισθητοποιούμε την κοινή γνώμη, να μην ξεχνάμε ότι και το Παρίσι έχει τα δικά του κομμάτια από τον Παρθενώνα και η UNESCO το 2021 πήρε μια απόφαση. Είναι σημαντικό το ότι ήταν απόφαση και όχι απλώς ψήφισμα, στο οποίο δήλωσε ότι το ζήτημα είναι διακυβερνητικό και ότι η υποχρέωση, και χρησιμοποίησε τη λέξη υποχρέωση, για την επιστροφή των μαρμάρων η υποχρέωση βαρύνει την Μεγάλη Βρετανία. Εννοείται ότι μιλάμε για την περίπτωση των μαρμάρων του Παρθενώνα.
Νομίζω είναι πολύ σημαντικό να ενημερώνουμε την κοινή γνώμη για ένα θέμα που δεν είναι μόνο εθνικό και σε αυτό συντάσσονται όλοι οι Έλληνες, αλλά είναι ένα θέμα διεθνές. Γιατί ο Παρθενώνας είναι ένα κομμάτι της παγκόσμιας πολιτιστικής κληρονομιάς, είναι ένα σύμβολο της ελληνικής συμβολής στον πολιτισμό, δηλαδή στη δημοκρατία, ότι τοποθετήθηκε ο άνθρωπος ως μέτρο των πάντων, στο κέντρο δηλαδή της πολιτείας και επίσης φυσικά ότι πρόκειται για ένα αριστούργημα από πλευράς αρχιτεκτονικής, το οποίο βρίσκεται σε διάλογο με όλο το περιβάλλον στο οποίο δημιουργήθηκε και μέσα στο οποίο εντάχθηκε. Επομένως, το να υπάρχει ενημέρωση στον ακαδημαϊκό χώρο αλλά και γενικότερα της διεθνούς κοινής γνώμης για το δίκαιο του αιτήματος της επανένωσης των γλυπτών του Παρθενώνα με το σύνολο στο οποίο ανήκουν, θεωρώ ότι είναι ένα σημαντικό έργο το οποίο συνεχίζεται